I was just sitting here reflecting on how quickly your life can just flash by when you're battling a chronic disease, when you're battling chronic symptoms, dis-ease, chronic symptoms, because every single day it just feels like I just got to make it through this day. I have to just make it through work today, and then I can get home and rest. And then I just have to make it through feeding the family, and then I can go lay down and watch some TV. And your life is so compartmentalized because you have to compartmentalize everything in your life when you just feel terrible all the time. So some days I look back on my life and I think, where did 10 years go? What happened? Where did my life go? And inside of my heart, I still feel like I'm very young, in my 30s, because it's like I never got to live those years in my life because I was just always bedridden. I was just always sick. And I feel myself sort of, feeling like I need to catch up. Hello, everyone. For the years that I missed. And I hate that feeling. And I don't want anyone else to ever suffer that way when I know that there's so many things we can do to move your health forward. So, hi everyone. I'm Coach Sarah Joy. I'm 43 years old. And I want to talk to you guys today about my story and how I got to where I am today. So thank you all for being here, either live or on the replay. And if you have any questions for me, go ahead and drop them below, and we can talk in between my story. So it's very emotional for me to reflect back on everything I went through, because as you guys know, there's so many just not happy things that you go through when you're struggling from hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, Graves, Hashimoto's, and other illnesses. It's just there's nothing pleasant about it, so for me it is always a very kind of gloomy time in my life, but I know it's important to share with you guys what I've been through so you're not alone. And that was one of the things that I always really, really struggled with, was I felt so alone. None of my immediate friends, none of my immediate family members, especially in the beginning when I was diagnosed in 2009, no one was diagnosed with a thyroid condition. Like, it just wasn't talked about. Nowadays, I feel like it's more talked about, also maybe because of my world, but I also feel like more and more people are being diagnosed. So even though it's still very much like in the shadows, it is more talked about, definitely online, than it was when I was all by myself. So in 2009, I had that was a rough year for me. Super rough year. I had been married for about 6 years, and I was at a very low point in my life. Everything in my life had crumbled. Looking back now, you guys, that I've studied narcissists, I realize I married an insane narcissist. And I was having the kind of marriage that reflected that. He wasn't faithful. He was extremely verbally abusive. He was physically abusive. I mean, he was just like an assassin on all levels. And I was miserable. And I can tell you from all of the things that I've studied, there's so many factors that go into symptoms. But your relationship and the people you are directly around, your boyfriend or your girlfriend or your mom or your dad or whoever's really close to you, their energy highly affects you and can make you sick if they're not a healthy person. And so that was what was going on with me. It was around very unhealthy people. And I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism, and I started having mystery pains all over my body, and the fatigue set in really, really, really strongly. And that was the first thing that just like took me down, was the fatigue. Can you guys relate to that? Hello. I did put up a fundraiser because I thought it would be fun. Why not? It's a fundraiser for Thyroid Trust. I actually need to look into them. I'm not sure what they were. I just looked up thyroid and I was like, well, hopefully they're trustworthy because they have the word trust in their name. But I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism sort of out of the blue, just like, kind of what happens to you guys. It's just, well, some of you really battle for that diagnosis, but some of us, the majority of us, it just is kind of like this thing that happens out of nowhere and we're kind of taken by surprise, And between getting the diagnosis and having the symptoms, I was so just sad. I was saddened by everything going on, but I was also extremely naive. And I was thinking I could just take a pill every day and that would be my cure. And even though I didn't like the idea of having to take a pill every day for the rest of my life and being dependent on a pill, I was also, again, just naive, thinking like, oh, all I have to do is take a pill. Cool. Wow, that is so not how it works, right, you guys? It's like the medication doesn't really do much, It's like, I remember feeling spurts of like, I would take it and I would feel better, but then it would just like wear off or things would just like go wrong with the medication, it seemed. And I was always in this constant, like, is my dosage okay? Is my TSH okay? And it was like, I really hated the constant like swinging on the medication, and I had no idea going into it that that's what was going to happen. So you don't realize at the very beginning that there's so much more to the story, so much more to the picture. The doctors don't tell you, and thankfully nowadays there's a lot more information online that teaches you things, but it is very much like a mystery still. So I just tried to do the best I could and go through life and take care of my son and take care of my family and clean and go to work and just have the average life that everyone lives. But it became extremely difficult just to live a basic life. It was like just getting out of bed in the morning suddenly became really hard. And how many of you agree with me? We do not appreciate our energy until it's gone. I mean, that is like one of those things where we take for granted until it's gone. And then you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to live? How am I going to do anything? And it's actually a very scary thing to go through that gives you a lot of anxiety and panic attacks because you can't even just do the normal things in life like walk around, And I remember feeling so weak that I could barely turn the steering wheel to drive, And when you're in this kind of a state, it's very hard for people to understand what this feels like. It is very, very scary. And it makes you dependent on other people to help you, which also then plays into not feeling good about yourself because you lose your independence. you know? So I just continued to try to do the best I could. I did the best I could with the information I had and the information that I could seek out. And as the years went on, YouTube was getting more popular, Facebook, Instagram, and I can't say that it necessarily helped me. It seemed to confuse me more than help me. And so I think I was trying to do all of the things that like the majority of you guys did. I shifted to eating all organic, you know, and all of these changes are really, really good. But it didn't, for me, it didn't get me better. It didn't get me back to feeling energized, back to feeling happy, back to just feeling like myself again, you know? So it's extremely frustrating. I started paying more attention to my food sources, my food supply, and being more mindful of getting more nutrients into my body. But I was absolutely living on caffeine. I had no choice. Just like we all feel, like when you're in a state of negative energy and you still have to get up and take care of the kids and go to work and clean the house and cook dinner or whatever, all of the demands that we have on us, it is impossible when you literally feel like you live in you're like in a video game. How many of you have ever felt that before? I literally felt like I was living in a virtual reality back then. It was like such a space cadet. And it not only was it hard to drive just because of the tiredness factor, but it was hard to drive because of the spacey factor. I remember I would just space out when I was on the road. And my eyes would kind of go cross-eyed and I'd just be a little spacey. And that's very dangerous when you're driving too, you know? And so I became less and less comfortable with driving as I got more and more sick as well. And I started really just like, I stopped driving on the freeways altogether because it just felt so overwhelming. Like my nervous system just couldn't handle the freeways anymore. Like all of the fast cars speeding around me, because I, got to the point where when I was driving, I just constantly felt like I was in that video game mindset, and everything in my body just felt like it was in slow motion. You know, it was like I talked slower, I thought slower, I walked slower, I drove slower. And so when I would get on the freeway and all these people would be zooming past me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, and it started getting really scary. And I literally stopped driving on the freeways. It was just too overwhelming. And my central nervous system was like, it would put me into panic attacks. And so it just seemed like, I was taking my medication and I was going to do my labs, and the labs were just super frustrating because they were never stable. And all these things in my life just started closing in on me, like the driving, and it was just so incredibly isolating on so many levels, and I just had no one to talk to, because it's not like I was going out and making new friends, it was like I was just in my own little bubble, and I was with my family, I was with my kids day in and day out. And again, like no one around me had a thyroid condition. And it was like, I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't have anyone to talk to. And I remember this one time, this lady from church stopped by to like drop something off to me, and she was really sweet, and she was like, hi, how are you doing? And checking in on me. And I just told her I've been really struggling with a thyroid condition. And she was like, oh, I have one too. And I remember my whole soul was like, oh, what? And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what's wrong with you? And like, I just started like quizzing her on like, what do you feel like? And how do you feel? And what are your symptoms? And I remember she told me, oh yeah, I always just feel tired. And she's like, but I'm used to it. And I remember feeling very unsatisfied with that conversation because she just kind of like, she just kind of like, yeah, I'm tired, and yeah, I have it, but it's no big deal. Like, I deal with it. And I remember thinking, like, are you crazy? Like, this is insane. I don't know how I'm alive. I don't know how I walk all day long, you know? And she was just like, nah. And then I remember she goes, oh, I haven't checked my blood in a long time. I should probably make an appointment and go see my endo. Thanks for reminding me. And I was like, endo? I'd never heard of an endo before. Yeah, I was like, what? 5 years in. I had hypo for a long time at this point, and I'd never been told about an endo. And I was like, what's an endo? And she goes, oh, it's the specialist. And I was like, specialist for what? And she was like, your thyroid. And I was like, what? That exists? And she's like, yeah. So I remember feeling really, really excited. And I was like, oh, I can go see someone that specializes in this. And I remember thinking, like, why am I wasting my time with this primary guy, you know? So I was all upset and I was excited at the same time. So I went back to my doctor and I was like, can you refer me to an endo? And he was like, oh yeah, sure. And I was like, I felt like I'd been jaded or something, cheated out of like an opportunity to get better this whole time or something, you know? So he sends this referral in, right? So I make my appointment and I go over to, it's like 2 to 3 weeks later. You know how it always takes a while to get in. So I remember going over to my first endo appointment. And I always judged, you guys do this, I'd love to know if you guys do this. I always judged a doctor by the waiting room, by what the waiting room looked like, how the decorations were, you know, if it was like kind of ghetto or kind of fancy. And I always felt like if they had a fancy waiting room, I was probably going to see like a smarter doctor, right? Someone that really knew what they were doing. Weird, but I did. So I remember going in and I met the endo, and then it was just a very, nothing came of this. It was appointment. It was like nothing any different than my primary did. And he was just like, let's check your blood work and what are you taking? And I was like, okay, like what was the point of that? And so I left very like frustrated and, you know, just kind of felt like, okay, back to square one, right back to where I was. Like that was a waste of time. And I just kept trying to live through my life. And my son had gotten older at this point. He was now 7. And my daughter kept coming to me in dreams. And she kept telling me, Mom, I want to come to you. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how would I ever have a baby? How would I ever make it through a newborn with what I feel? And the idea of getting pregnant with all the symptoms that I had were like, you know, like, I don't know if I should do this. But she kept coming to me in my dreams. And I was like overwhelmed by her spirit telling me, Mom, I'm waiting to come to you. And so I remember telling my husband at the time, like, you know, there's a little girl that's waiting to come to us. And he's like, oh, I don't want to have any more kids. And I was like, are you sure? Like, she's visited me in my dreams like many times. And he's like, I'm good. He's like, we're good. And I was like, I can't really deny this. Like, you know, like this is, she's real. Like I can see her. And so I stopped my birth control. I had the Marina IUD. So I went and got it out, and I was just kind of like, well, if it happens, it happens, right? Because I know she's waiting, but I'm not going to like pressure my husband into this. And so I guess you could say I actively tried to get pregnant for like 6 months, and nothing was working. And I was like, well, is my body broken? And I remember going back to the doctors, and he was like, I went to a different doctor. This time I was like, I want to see a holistic, like a all natural doctor, and get kind of like a different standpoint. And he was like, maybe you should just increase your medication, or, he just wanted to mess with my medication. And I was like, really? Like, that's your answer? It just seemed like every time I went to the doctor for help, there was just no substantial answers to anything. They all just wanted to pull the same labs, and they all were just clueless. And I was like, the system was just so frustrating. And all they did was let me down over and over and over. So he was basically of no help. And you know how you always hear that thing where, like, when you're actively trying, you're kind of like stressing yourself out and putting too much pressure on yourself. And then when you stop and you don't care anymore, that's when it happens. That's exactly what happened, And I was like, yeah, whatever. And I stopped even thinking about it or caring. And like, boom, within a month, I was pregnant. So like I was already kind of worried about, my pregnancy was very, it was fine. Honestly, I think my pregnancy would have been totally fine if the doctor hadn't have dropped the ball on me. Because I started seeing this OB, and when I was 4 months in, they changed offices. And it took them 2 months to change offices. And instead of telling me, like, why don't you temporarily go over to this doctor and have them monitor you, they just kept saying, like, oh, it'll be open soon. It'll be open soon. And it was during those 2 months that shit really hit the fan in my pregnancy. And I was still working full time. And one just normal morning, I was, again, I was 6 months pregnant, so I had a pretty good sized baby bump at this point. And I show up to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was only there for like 15 minutes. And then I started feeling really sharp pains in my heart. And I sat down in my chair, and I was grabbing my chest, and I was like, oh, it was killing me. And I literally felt like I was having a heart attack. And my boss was like, are you okay? Are you okay? You okay? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just having really, really, really bad sharp pains in my heart. And they lasted for like a minute straight and then went away. And she was like, are you okay? And I'm like, I guess so, but I don't know. That was really, really scary. And I was like, I think I should leave and go to the doctors and get checked out. So I drove myself to like half a mile down to the hospital. And I was like, I think I just had a heart attack. And they were like, what? So they hooked me up to the EKG, and everything was fine. And they're like, you're fine. Everything's fine. And I was like, really? Then like, what just happened to me? And they're like, we don't know. And I was like, okay. So in the meantime, they pulled some labs, and they're like, oh, your TSH is really high. It was like a 4.7 or something, when normally it was like a 1.5 or below. And I was like, ooh, that is really high for me. And they're like, you need to go see your doctor. Here, take these labs and go see your doctor. I'm like, yeah, good idea. So the next day, my doctor's office opened back up, and I told him, I called and I told him what happened. They're like, yeah, come right in. And I get there, and the doctor looks at the labs. She looks at like the ER notes, and I told her what happened, and she like went all like, and got all scared. And she's like, you're getting pulled out on disability today. And I was like, today? And she's like, today. I was like, I have inventory at work tomorrow. She's like, I don't care. You're not going to work anymore. And I was like, oh. And it kind of scared me, everything that was happening. And after that, I was considered high risk, and I had to go sit in this chair, this recliner, every week and have my baby bump monitored for an hour. And it did nothing. And I was like, huh, okay. So she increased my medication. I started feeling better, and I didn't have anything else happen during my pregnancy, and everything was fine. But the one thing that I did notice about pregnancy is when the baby, because it takes so much from you when you're pregnant, you have to increase your dosage. And then when you're coming out of pregnancy, you have to slowly decrease your dosage. It's like this gradual uptake, this gradual downtake. So I think before I was pregnant, I was on 60 milligrams of Armour Thyroid, and I had to go up to 90. I think it was only 90. I went up the next dosage, and I was fine. And then, but I want to say it was higher than that. Gosh, it's been so long, you guys. My daughter's 11 now. I just remember I had to go up quite a bit. It was like, 30 milligram or more jump, which is not normal. You never want to jump milligrams that high, because you can put yourself into hyper. You can tank your TSH down too low and put yourself into hyper, which is when you get the heart palpitations and you get the nervousness, the anxiousness, and that feels terrible. So I was worried about that happening, but it didn't, and I was good. And then I remember after she was born and my body was down regulating back to a normal set point, the delicate balance of bringing my medication back down was difficult, and I was having to test every 6 weeks to stay on top of it and make sure that I wasn't going to go into hyper by being on too much medication. But yeah, it was really rough after I had her. My gosh, I was so tired. And I know it was just a combination of, it's normal to have like the tiredness from the baby, but because I already had the fatigue on top of not sleeping, on top of the newborn, I was just in zombie land, like complete zombie land. And there's no way I would have been able to be working or had any sort of like responsibilities on me outside of that, because I was just barely getting by, taking care of her. And my in-laws and my family were helping me out with my son, but thankfully he was older, so it was a lot easier. So I don't know why I've decided to go into the pregnancy side of it. I just feel like there's a lot that we go through as women, that's not talked about and not shared. So things just continued from there, and I never felt like I got better. I always just felt like I was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And the more I fought, the more sicker I got. And, fast forward to now as a coach. I've been a thyroid coach now. So I launched my company a week before lockdowns. That was brutal, but I survived. It's been quite a roller coaster ride, you guys, to be able to get the clarity that I have now of what is going on with our bodies and what is making us sick. So I was listening to a narcissist coach this morning, and he started talking about how the health consequences on our bodies when we are in an extremely depleting relationship. And I mean, just from what he was saying of the changes that happen in our brain, I think he said it was to our hypothalamus. They enlarge, literally, like our brains, like systems within our brains, when we're under constant stress in a relationship, like they enlarge and they mutate to be able to adapt to the constant fight or flight and the stress that you're under from this person in your life. And everything that I know also from what adrenaline does to us and being in constant fight or flight, and the mineral depletions and the infections that set in, and the gut dysbiosis, and especially if you're already not eating well, and then the mental trauma that goes into all of this as well. It's like, it is so multifaceted, and I've spoken to so many women that are battling sexual abuse, too, not just the relationship abuse, they've been abused by people in their families. There are so many angles to the illness that I resonate with myself. I was under the abuse. I was under the constant fight or flight. I was under the constant fear of my partner, and I wasn't eating properly because I didn't know how to, and I was living on caffeine, which is so dehydrating. And it's like I can see how so many things in our lives are directly connected. Our symptoms are directly connected to stress and trauma that really just tax us. They tax our systems in so many ways. It's like you hear that saying of a negative thought is 70 times more powerful than a positive thought. So think about that. A negative situation is probably 70 times more depleting on your body than a positive situation, because I know for a fact that when we are stressed out, we're under trauma, we're under grief, we're in loss, we have a broken heart, our bodies burn through everything 5 times faster. And what I'm seeing happen on all of my clients' test results, on my test results, is the basic minerals that we need just to be able to have a healthy functioning body, like sodium. For example, so many people's sodium is screwed up. So many people's potassium is screwed up. 2 very basic minerals that our bodies cannot make, we have to ingest every day. And the majority of people that I see are extremely deficient in just these. Do you know what the symptoms are from not having those? If you do not have sodium, first of all, your adrenal glands cannot function. They live on sodium. Our bodies actually thrive on sodium. And you have to have potassium in order to balance out the sodium. So like, for example, this last week, my client's results showed that she was really, really high in her sodium. She's had a diet full of processed foods, so I wasn't surprised. So I'm going to actually begin utilizing potassium to push out the sodium that's in her cells. So a lot of you that are dealing with like water retention, it's called the thyroid puff. Have you ever heard of that, the thyroid puff? It's like you just feel puffy everywhere, or you feel like you have the water retention. You can use potassium. Potassium pushes water retention out of your cells. And so what is potassium? Am I saying go take potassium supplements? No, it's super easy to get potassium into your diet, you guys. You just have to stop being scared of healthy foods like bananas. Bananas have so much potassium in them. Avocados have a lot of potassium. So do potatoes. All the foods that you're told like, stay away from, they're the ones you need. Coconut water is such a quick and easy way to get potassium. Just drink some 100% organic, just pure coconut water. Look on the side of a container of coconut water next time you're around it, and look how much potassium is in it. And no, you guys, do not drink Gatorade. That is not the ideal plan. Give me 1 second, honey. I'm almost done. Okay. I've had so many people tell me like, oh, I want to balance out my electrolytes. I'm going to drink Gatorade or Powerade. What is that sugar water going to do for you? Okay. So, there's just so much to it. And one of the things that I'm hearing recently is a lot of women are like, oh, I would love to work with you, but. And I encourage you to remove that but out of the sentence and do whatever it takes to be able to get the level of answers and support that you need now. It is so important to attack your situation aggressively so that you can preserve your life. Like I was saying at the beginning of this, time goes by so fast. And if you put yourself on the back burner and you're constantly just like, oh, I'll do it one day, or, oh, I'll try this doctor, but the doctor does nothing, and now you're wasting money. Oh, I'll try to do it myself. DIYing this is not advised. It is not advised. You need the targeted testing to give you the direction. That is exactly what I do, and that is how I live. It is how I've reversed 25 symptoms. It is how I maintain my health. I do not guesstimate. I know exactly what we're doing. Just like I told you with my client who has the high sodium, I'm going to use potassium as a target to remove the high amount of sodium. How would you know how to do something like this unless you did the right testing? And you cannot do that through blood work. You cannot test your minerals through blood work. You have to use your hair. So I would hate to see any one of you lose any more of your life to not feeling good. And the one thing you have to remember when you're looking at me, when you're considering working with me, you're considering my prices, considering my programs, is everything we do now is going to affect the rest of your life. So the investment you make now, today in yourself, is going to continue to serve you and help you the remainder of your life. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to do this one-time investment and it's going to help me now. No, because you're going to learn things, you're going to implement things, and you're going to change yourself and your lifestyle to be able to better serve you moving forward. And plus, working with me is not like a one-time thing. There's always future retesting. And plus, I have a lot of other rad programs coming down, like communities and group memberships. So I encourage you guys all to stay close to me. And I invite you in to talk to me, get to know me, share your stories with me, and see how I can help you. Because I know I can. I know I'm a lot different than other thyroid coaches. And I have the passion, drive, love, dedication to you to be able to reverse your symptoms too. So you can check out the link in my bio. You can book a free discovery call. It's a 60-minute Zoom, and you can tell me anything you want to tell me about your situation. The more in depth you can tell me, the better, so that I can understand where you're at, because that helps me place you in one of my programs. Because what my programs are very different. I have just a nutrition program. I have just a gut restoration program. I have just a hair program. And they all are intertwined, obviously, and they all go together, but your symptoms indicate to me which body systems need to be repaired first. You know, for example, it's like if you're really battling brain fog and the inability to lose weight, we should probably look at your gut. That goes into like depression and some other things as well. So I invite you guys to book your call. If you have any questions, DM me anytime. Thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.